Jason was just about to. Jason, you might want to adjust your phone a little bit so we can see your face. There we
Well,
go.
that would help.
Jason was just about to enlighten us with some of his thoughts, advice as to how to stay positive during all this craziness.
Yeah, yeah. So I think like most of us, like around March 12th was when things really, it was like that realization things are starting to close down. And at first we're all like, okay, it's gonna be March. We'll be back, in April and May. But as things unfurled, and it was like, okay, once the summer started clearing and
Yeah.
just, it was it was tough at first to digest. But I mean, we were all in the same boat, and there's a lot of people who are getting sick, and it's like, I think I quickly, didn't make it about me at all. You know what I mean? So it's like at first it was a big bummer, and everyone's going through it, but I like you said, I try to stay positive, and I try to do what I can to just make the most of every situation when I can. So um, I've actually been able to do some back burner projects. So musically, I've been working a lot on these solo violin pieces. So
Oh, the J-Tudes.
the J-Tudes, yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
I did an interview with violinist.com and Gil Shaham. They invited me on as their special guest to talk about my J-Tudes. And
Cool.
and that was kind of early. When was that? That was a few months back. And then after that, it was like full steam ahead, and I was had a surge of creativity, and I was just been cranking them out because my goal is to try to write 24 like the Paganini
Like the
caprices,
Caprices, yeah.
but with my own spin and you know, my own writing style. And
Mm.
they're also extremely fun to work on and to learn. I learned so much by working on them and just discovering new things and getting ideas
Yeah.
out. And solo violin is totally different. I've mostly composed over the years, from the standpoint of, oh, this is for my trio, or this is for the Rhythm Future Quartet. And so
Mhm.
I'm more in an arranging, okay, let's see what the guitars can do. Here's a consistent rhythm and chordal structure that I can work from. And so I'm more melody driven. So it's been really interesting to work on composing from the perspective of just what's possible as a solo violinist. Um, and I've also been doing tons of research. So I've been digging deep into Bach, Isai, and like other solo etude books out there like The Road and Don't, just to see what has been done, where I can learn from the past, what I can do to bring something different to the solo violin repertoire. And so it's been a
Cool.
nice project on every level. And also, we're spending so much time by ourselves, like,
Yeah.
as musicians. And it was like the perfect back burner project. And it took a while because I wasn't feeling creative at first. And I think a lot of us were just like, when I picked up the instrument, I just wanted to do something that just made me feel good.
Yeah.
So it was not necessarily these writing challenging pieces that were like really pushing me technically and pushing me like on all levels. Like that didn't seem like the
Yeah.
thing I wanted to do at first. But then once I got over that hump a few months back and got some momentum with it, then it was like I would write like two a day, and like they're just like
Wow.
some I wouldn't use, some I would craft into something different. But yeah, now I'm on the way. I think I have about 12.
Just
Um,
12 more to go. You're halfway there.
Yeah, I think the idea that I want to do is to do like two installments, like a book of the first 12, and each one is going to have like a small takeaway exercise.
Hmm.
So I've been for like my students at Berklee and workshops that I've done around the world, I like to have these little isolated exercises that, some of them are these little challenges to navigate the fingerboard, to make
Hmm.
you think about chords, and they're, like little key studies or just things that helped me unlock my ability to improvise, my ability to compose, and just to see the instrument differently. And so each one of them is going to have some sort of takeaway that pairs with the composition. So that's the goal. That's probably why it's going to take a while to get these done.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, like, the writing, composing is much easier than like the actually scoring it out part, which is
Yeah.
fun, and but that's like more tedious. But then that's how people can play them.
Yeah, I know.
Gotta write it
I
out.
used to think I have good handwriting, and then, no, you got to put it in finale.
But
You gotta.
yeah, I do. I do Sibelius. Man, thank goodness for that, because my handwriting, since I've been doing so much, I feel like since college I've been writing stuff in Sibelius. So
It's
my actual physical hand notation is pretty bad.
it's crazy when you look at like an old like some of the greatest composers like Bach or Brahms, Mozart. You look at their original scores, and there was no Sibelius back then. You're like, people had to read this. It's like I wouldn't have been able to play this.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's pretty awesome. And I love that. I love people that still do it organically like that, and I guess more analog, where they'll
Mhm.
always have little books with them. Wherever they're at, they get an idea in their head, they write it out. What I do is, if I get an idea, I just get my voice memo on my phone and record it. So that's kind of my version of if I get an idea in a random place and I can't score it out.
Yeah, cool, man. Well, I'm excited to see how that develops. When.
I have a couple scored out. I right now I'm in this phase where I'm kind of sending them out to a few different people. One, to get feedback on like, some things I didn't. Oh, that should have been an accidental, or this should have been written this way. So to get feedback from different people, and also I just love hearing other people play them, and
Send
that's
me
something
one,
that's
man. I'd love to learn one.
yeah. I'll send you a few. Yeah, I got a couple.
Please.
Yeah, yeah.
Or a few, yeah. Cool. Well, yeah, I guess like on the topic of practice, I've always thought of you as being a pretty diligent practicer. How has your practice routine changed since the onset of COVID, or is it still similar to the way it was?
Hmm. Well, I've always I've always had kind of a mixed approach to practicing, and I've always kind of had this hybrid approach that, ever since college been developing, that is a little bit classical oriented, so getting my reading chops and something that pushes me technically, and then something that challenges how I visualize the fingerboard, some fingerboard exercise, um, and then I'll always be trying to transcribe, but I don't transcribe every day. But that's usually some sort of transcription project, some composing. You know, I could play for 6 hours straight. I love working on stuff. I love developing, but I wouldn't say it's as diligent as some folks out there that are like the notebook, and they check off 15 minutes of this, 10 minutes of this. I've never been that style. I like carving out big chunks of time, and like a few things that I do regularly are like long tones, things that put me into a good mind state. So like
Mm.
always just working on playing more relaxed, playing, more in tune, better tone. So those are things that I really like to do, just to like open up, as a way to open up my practice, and just feel good about playing, and then I dive in. And I would say 99% of all my practice sessions include some Bach partita work, and just that's a never-ending journey, is learning and working on all the Bach partitas. And
Yeah.
I have been doing it for years and still do it. So whether it's like, this one, I could do it so much better, let me get deeper into it, or, I actually never did this one section of this, or I haven't done the full,
Hmm.
front to back on one, so I really like to dig into some Bach or other solo material, in particularly right now. But that's something I've always had, is like I'll do like an hour or two, sometimes even 2 hours of Bach, or
Hmm.
stuff from classical world. You know, when I was in college, I was actually studying both classical and jazz. So my classical teacher just gave me unlimited amount of stuff to work on, which is great
Hmm.
from all these etudes. And so I figure if I'm always just chipping away at things that are pushing me technically, then can't go wrong. Um, so
Awesome.
that's super helpful to keep that up. Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Bach as well. I've been chipping away at his stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
So for folks out there that don't know your background, so you mentioned, you studied classical music, obviously jazz. What did you study the two simultaneously, or tell us a little bit about your musical journey, as it were?
Yeah, so I started playing fiddle when I was around 5, maybe 6. My dad is a fiddle player as well. He plays fiddle, guitar, mandolin. So he was a big fan of bluegrass, swing music, and introduced me to a lot of music early on. But he also got me started with a classical teacher. So I was doing, classical lessons, and then in the summer I would just do fiddle stuff, and I would do fiddle contests, and I'd play with my dad. So early on, I was kind of in both worlds. And I think there's a lot of us, like yourself included, who that's kind of like had that lived in both worlds, where it's like you're learning by ear early on,
Hmm.
fiddle tunes, and just kind of trying to like hack your way through these things all by ear, no music, and then also learning stuff by music. That was really helpful. And I kind of kept that going. But when I was around 11 or I think it was around 12, I actually got to see Stefan Grappelli perform.
Wow.
Yeah, so my dad is a huge fan of Django's music, and so I think when we were like 11 or 12, Spotify didn't exist, YouTube didn't exist.
I
So
think we're
you
the same
actually,
age.
yeah,
87?
no, I'm 80. What am I? 85.
Okay.
But when we were there, it was. I feel like for me, it wasn't until like college that YouTube and that kind of stuff existed. Of
Mhm.
course, there's going to be people watching this that are like, I didn't have that till I was 50. But just the idea that it was obscure to hear Django and to hear Grappelli and get into it early on. I'd say it was pretty obscure and so luckily my dad was a big fan of that style, and so we were listening to it, and when we saw Grappelli, and then I started to go to some camps. Um,
Mm.
and started to meet people. So another thing, so like everything is like hard work and luck and chance. So I happened to live, like an hour from one of the preeminent camps, Django in June, which uh, flies in all these amazing gypsy jazz artists um, into Northampton, Massachusetts. And this is a great camp. I later was teaching at it, but I went there and I got exposed to this style of music, and then like my dad and I would just try to work on it and try to figure it out. So it was really fun to. I always loved improvising, so my dad would just kind of, hey, let's jam on minor swing, and we just played for hours straight,
Wow.
and so that was a lot of fun. And so then I also then really got into bebop. So my brother was learning saxophone, and he had Charlie Parker's Greatest Hits album lying around, and I snagged that from him because I was like, I'm not hearing a ton of violinists play bebop on it. Like, I just didn't. It seemed like a something that wasn't that prevalent. I later discovered people that were doing it, but at that time I hadn't really heard anyone do it. So it excited me to try to bring that kind of like saxophone language onto the violin. So for 1 year when I was 15, I only listened to Charlie Parker
Mm.
until I could sing every single solo on it and play every solo on it. So that was definitely uh, pretty prevalent to my ability to start understanding jazz language. And
Hmm.
I just was like, oh, this is great. And Charlie Parker's stuff, as you know, because you've transcribed some Charlie Parker as well, our sax players, they fits really nicely on the violin.
Yeah.
It's not easy to get the phrasing, but once you do, you realize that the violin is actually a great jazz instrument.
Totally.
It's just a kind of a pain in the butt instrument to like get even just to a certain technical level of just a good sound and control, which is what makes it difficult. But as a I feel like it's a great jazz instrument, and you know, to be able to play Charlie Parker solos fluidly on the violin, yeah, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, so you know, I was exposed early to gypsy jazz, fiddle music, improvisation. I was composing with my dad a ton when I was younger, getting really into bebop and jazz. And another thing that was really lucky is being close to Boston. So
Mm.
I was going to jazz jams around the Boston area, and a lot of actually a lot of my now colleagues at Berklee were hosting these jazz jam sessions. I would go to 3 or 4 a week when I
Wow.
was in high school.
Gypsy
So,
jazz or all kinds of
oh,
jazz?
these were actually more just straight ahead. So the gypsy jazz stuff was I was doing more with my dad or like these camps or more on my own, and then like straight ahead jazz. I back then I had an electric violin too that I was playing, which was fun. Thought it was the coolest.
Right.
Um, and yeah, there was like 3 or 4 jazz jam sessions where I would just be able to sit in with these Berklee professors, and they were
Wow.
yeah. So I feel like I had a good training ground. And meanwhile, I was playing in some orchestras in school and keeping up the classical chops. Um, and so when I ended up going to college and finding this program at Hart where I could do like classical and jazz, it was pretty exciting. And yeah, so that set me off onto the next journey.
So where did you go to school? Remind us.
So Hart Conservatory is in it's at the University of Hartford in Connecticut.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yep.
I wanted to ask you a question. You were talking about, you play even more styles of jazz than you just mentioned, and I wanted to ask you. You could answer this question, I guess, in the context of jazz or your jazz persona, or just the general Jason Anick musical persona. But is there a specific jazz language or musical language uh, that you kind of gravitate toward first, or not gravitate toward, but maybe is like your point of reference for improvisation, or by this point is it just like a melting pot of everything?
It's like currently.
Yeah.
So I would say currently, yeah, it's a huge melting pot, and I think I don't even really necessarily just at this point call it jazz. To me, like jazz,
Mhm.
it's just like freedom. It's like improvisation within the style.
Right.
Because I have, like you said, and you as well, you know, got really influenced by, you know, music from Brazil, or I got into like music from the Balkans. And I don't mean as deeply as the people who like dedicate their lives to the style, but
Mhm.
I, I found so much value and so interested in, oh, that's something new that, so one way that I did that, especially with my group Rhythm Future Quartet, is I'll try to compose a song that has elements of these other styles that I'm digging into, whether it's
Mhm.
Balkan or Brazilian. And usually I'll learn some of the traditional stuff and try to just, and then, um, you know, get inspired enough to try to compose something with that flavor that's
Mhm.
still very much me. Um, yeah, so I would say in general, it's such a hodgepodge, you know,
Mhm.
from everything from like, I still love bringing in like the roots and folk stuff into it that
Mhm.
I've learned into it, but also to modern jazz. I love, like, I have a quintet that plays with like piano, sax, sometimes sax or trumpet. And so
Mhm.
like more traditional, and I've done a couple recordings with that group. And I love modern jazz as well. And, you know, to me, the thing that excited me, and it goes back to when I was maybe 11 or 12, I just love the idea that it's very personal. Jazz is very
Mhm.
personal, and that, hey, I could be playing the same song with somebody else who's doing something really cool, but I can do something different and really cool
Mhm.
with it as well. And I
Absolutely.
just always wanted to be more independent in that regards, and jazz and improvisation. And like when I was 11, I had this actual thought of like infinite licks. Like that was my goal. Obviously, you know, somebody, well, actually, if it's all, it's really just, well,
Yeah, yeah.
it was just that idea of just like unlocking the floodgates. It's like I want to be able to play a song over and over again and it be fresh every time I play it. And to
Mm,
me, like, they talk about flow state in,
yeah.
in music. And so to me, my flow state when I'm playing music is when I am able to improvise.
Mm.
And that's how I get there. Uh, I can get there playing through composed stuff as well, but I find that I get there like that wavelength where like that there's nothing else in the world. You're so focused on just making music and being in the moment. I get there when I'm improvising, with a good band and everything, the vibe's good. And
I'm curious to ask you something then, because I never went to jazz school, so I can't say like what the pedagogy is like, but I know that depending on the school you go to, it can be very pedagogical. Um, do you think that, and I really have no idea, so I'm kind of asking you this now. Do you, nowadays at jazz schools, is it a more like general improvisation base? Is it like moving away from a quote unquote school of jazz and to more just like where the objective is to achieve that flow state or just like your own improvisational language, which kind of transcends genre, which would be like a term jazz. Has that happened at all with so much genre blending and so much exposure with YouTube and all this?
I think it is definitely happening at Berklee. So I've been teaching at Berklee for a while, and my colleagues and even the students come from all around the world and have diverse backgrounds. And so what I'm seeing there is a very like open-minded approach where somebody's like, I want to come to Berklee and get some jazz and fuse it with Middle Eastern music and have form my own band with people from around the world and take the strengths of everybody to create something new. That's like, yes, let's do it. So that's something that's really cool. My own personal experience, like when I went to Hart, I at that time I was like really really focused on like bebop and contemporary jazz, and even less so, like I was kind of a little less interested in gypsy jazz at the time because it's like, all right, well, gypsy jazz is kind of the obvious choice for a violinist. Grappelli already paved that way, and so it just felt a little more unique to get away from it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I later then almost like basically made my career out of it once I got a gig touring with John Jorgensen Quintet
Right.
my senior year at college. And then I was like, all right, yeah, I like gypsy jazz. But you kind of have to rebel against the style for a bit before you come back.
Yeah, yeah,
um, so at heart, it was actually pretty much like the classic straight ahead. So 50s 60s era jazz was huge there.
yeah.
So learning the rep and arrangements, and it was cool because I would be like a horn player. They'd give me these arrangements where like you have the classic you know trumpet, sax, trombone, and then
Mm-hmm.
I would sit in like playing violin, but it would be like a horn section, and it was
Right.
it was really, I really enjoyed that. So I mean, it's not for everybody. Some people like, that's why you gotta like explore different possibilities. But at that time, it was really cool for me. And again, also being able to have a classical teacher, whip me into shape was really good. Um, so my classical teacher really focused on technique, just improving my overall playing drastically, and focusing on Bach. So I actually missed out on some classical repertoire because I was learning a lot of jazz and transcribing jazz and more in jazz ensembles. And it's been fun to go back and hey, I didn't do this concerto. Like, let me see if I can do it. Of course, I'll start doing it and it's like, this is fun, but then some other it's just so, I'm like, you have to spend so much time learning.
Yeah.
It's been like an entire year like working on a concerto. So I have been digging back into some classical rep that maybe I missed or I can
Mm-hmm.
learn from now, especially now I'm doing these solo violin pieces and I'm trying
Right.
to
It's like almost
figure out,
research.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, okay, what has been done from the hit, like all the years of violin
Mhm.
works out there. And so whether it's even just listening to certain concertos and just like picking out, sometimes I'll just like pick out parts without even like, sometimes look at the score. Sometimes I'll just, oh, that's a really cool technique. I love that, you know?
Mhm. Right on.
And so that's been fun. And so that's also something I've been doing, the being, you know, some of these back burner projects, given the lot less gigs right now.
You said projects. In the plural, so I'd love to hear a few more of them. But I do want to take some questions just because if you're just joining us, this is Jason Anick, obviously, and he has a gig later. So I want to make sure we have time for all the questions before Jason has to run off here. Uh,
I know, a gig. What is this
I know. I
thing?
was like, what? How dare you? In these
How
times
dare
of
you?
COVID, where
You know what's happening up here at least is that like I did this past weekend, I did a couple drive-in concerts that was kind of
Mhm.
interesting. So they just set up like a little makeshift shit stage with a PA and a tarp, and then
Yeah.
people drive in, and you know, people either sit next to their car to watch, or they just stay in their car if they feel like that's safer. And that was kind of fun. I mean, it's just good to be playing. So that was with my trio, which is a project I've been focusing a lot on lately. And so I would play. So this thing later on is just like, you know, there's a couple of things that have just like, typically it's a typical thing during this time of year. Is like, this restaurant was like, hey, we want music. You know,
Mhm.
we just got the okay that we can have music. And so they're just like, people are calling it, hey, like, can you get a trio? I can get this. So I have gotten some random last minute things
Cool,
that
man.
have come in, but that's just from the nicer weather, and allowing some outdoor,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
some
Yeah.
outdoor things going on. But it's so great to be playing. I did a show last night that was super fun. Um, and it was like a little different from what I normally do, which is also what made it really fun, with Celia Woodsmith, who is the front
Okay.
person with Delamay, a
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
great bluegrass band. So she lives in Kittery, where I live as well, and
Oh, okay. Yeah.
so we did a duo show, like
Cool.
outdoor. They had like these little squares for people to sit in, and
Uh,
yeah,
we have a question that just came in, so not to cut you
sure.
off, but this question, I guess I didn't ask this. How old were you when you started to play your instrument or an instrument?
Yeah, so somewhere between 5 and 6, you know. In other
Okay.
words, I was 5 and 3/4. I don't know, it was somewhere around there.
Right. It was
Uh,
violin.
yep, started violin. Yep, yeah. So like I said, my dad played, and he had violins around, and he said I'd always just like try to grab it and play it, and was so intrigued by it.
When
And
did the mandolin come into the picture?
so the progression was, so violin, and then I started playing guitar around 11 or
Okay.
12, and I instantly was composing on guitar, and I thought that was so fun to just, and of course when you're in high school, like playing guitar, it's like it was really fun. I just felt like it was like the cool thing to do.
Totally.
But I really
Violin wasn't
enjoyed
the cool
that.
thing to do? Come on.
Later it was, but I had to get over some of my own insecurities with violin, and
Hmm.
I think it's important for people to hear that I had those. I mean,
Hmm.
you know, it took a while to like feel I had to meet my people and go to camps, you know,
Right. Right. Right.
camps like the you know, Swananoa, for example, and just meet like-minded folks to then be like, you know what, this is me. And so that definitely came later. But playing guitar was, having like a phase where I like played a lot of guitar, was extremely beneficial for my composing, because a lot of times I'll you know, compose with guitar, but now mandolin as well, and
Is
just
that
having
because of the harmonic
a chordal
aspect?
instrument, yeah, and just being able to, especially for the Rhythm Future Quartet, like being able to write stuff and arrange stuff by like working on the guitar parts and
Hmm.
sending it off, and then just to have a platform to be able to write and have the chordal structure there, and the rhythmic structure is really important. Mandolin didn't actually come till probably like my junior senior year. I was like, well, I play guitar. Why do I need to play mandolin? Um, and that was, and then I had the thought, oh, maybe I could play mandolin. It's quieter. I can play it more in my room.
Yeah, yeah.
So when I was in college, I started playing more and more mandolin, and I honestly at first was like, I thought of it as a way to practice more violin.
Right.
But then I eventually was like, I love mandolin. It's such a great instrument itself. And then, like, I realized, oh, geez, it's a whole nother technique to actually get good at it. So I had to really
Right.
work on it. But yeah, it's such a good instrument. And now I love mixing it into a set. Like my new trio group, I'll
Right.
play mandolin and a few things as well. So I've tried to find my voice on that instrument as well over the years. But that definitely came a little bit later. I applied a lot of the guitar techniques that I had learned from
Hmm.
picking and just the idea of
Sure.
fretting. So it wasn't starting at zero, but then, and of course, having a similar fingerboard is really helpful. Mandolin being
Yeah.
similar to the violin. So that came a little later.
Okay. We have a few more questions. Someone on Facebook asked, "Have you tried Jam Kazam?"
No, but tell me about it.
I haven't tried it either, so I didn't ask the question. I don't know.
Is Jam Kazam a way to try to play live?
I I think well, it's definitely become much more popular in these times of COVID, but I'm
Hmm.
just going to be like shooting from the hip here, so I shouldn't answer this. Let's maybe our person working behind the scenes
That
can.
would be my guess, is because
Hmm,
I like so I've been making some of these kind of quarantine videos. So some of the videos that I've been doing for my YouTube channel, like Magic Fiddle,
uh-huh.
the ones where it's like split screen videos where I'll send it off and kind of record separately and then maybe do some tweaks after that. I've been doing some of those. I,
So what do you use again for those split screens?
I mean, with that, I got Final Cut Pro.
Okay, got
So
it.
nothing. No, I don't really know any special apps or anything like
Mhm.
that, other than just doing it, Final Cut Pro and just recording the videos, sending them, and joining them. So that's been
Got it.
fun.
We have another question here from someone in Brazil. Ju Schmidt, who says, "It's good to hear this conversation because sometimes I don't know if I focus in classical music." I think this is a question. If maybe she doesn't know if she should focus on classical music or gypsy jazz. Now I decided to study both because it's important to keep the technique.
Yes, yes. I can't stress enough the importance of musicians in general to both take like style seriously, like there's value of like diving deep into style, but also thinking more globally. In other words, every style is the same. So when you think, what I mean by that is they all have the same components. So if you build a foundation, then you can straddle different worlds. That's why like I can get a call and play in a bluegrass band, or I can get a call because I developed enough of a foundation, technical facility, my ear, but also then I have also have that, like I said, the respect for style, where okay, the components are all there, but what makes the style tick? All
Mm-hmm.
right, so for bluegrass, I'm not gonna use it vibrato. I'm gonna have a
Right.
different attack. Or if I'm playing Brazilian music, I just listen to it, figure out like, oh, okay, different articulation. What is
Right.
the underlying rhythm groove? What are some of the patterns? And swing, what is the swing pocket? How do I feel the
Yeah.
chord? So in other words, it's all the um, components, the foundation is all, to me, all the same. So that that is something I've always thought about. It's almost like, for me, I always think of it's like a tree, and
Yeah.
then each branch is a style. So I've been developing this musical tree that all has the same roots, right? Same foundational roots,
Mm-hmm.
and then each branch, they're all growing from the same thing. But of course, then you have to, like the subtleties we talked about, you dive into. So that's a good question, because I think a lot of people grow up thinking, oh, you can either be this or you can be this.
Yeah.
But I think there's enough now of fiddle players, if we're talking fiddle world,
Mm-hmm.
who have
This
traveled.
person plays classical and Brazilian. So, however, or no,
Very
gypsy
cool.
jazz. Excuse me, gypsy jazz.
Yeah, yeah. So that, so two that's like, two of the main styles I studied as well. And so I can totally relate. And what I would recommend is finding what makes them similar versus what just makes them different. So focusing on that as well. There are subtle differences, but make sure to also find commonalities.
I have a question on that. Have you ever encountered a style where you're like, man, I just can't crack this? Or maybe you've cracked it, but you're like, I just can't get the sound that they get.
Oh, I mean, yeah, at its highest level. I mean, like I said, like what I said before was, so I, dig into Brazilian. So I wouldn't say that I'm at the highest level of that, but I've gotten stuff out of it, and I feel like I can then, like I had the opportunity to play with Hamilton
Yeah,
Yolanda, and so it's like I feel like I could hang a little bit with him, but it's like wow, there's a whole world of rhythm that he's got that's just like that's next level.
yeah.
So yeah, no, I think for me, I've I feel like I've done my homework that I can, at least sit in with the groups or hang with these players.
Hmm.
But I would say that um, my personal voice has really resonated with like the gypsy jazz genre and kind of all the stuff I've done with that. So yeah, I would say that there's plenty of styles that there's so much more to dig into, so much more to learn. If I was gonna like be like, all right, I am touring with a only Brazilian super traditional group, I
Hmm.
would really, it would be like a few months of like only listening to that, only playing that style. Um,
Hmm.
but mostly playing like in my own groups with the occasional side person gigs. I can kind of choose the direction that I go, so it's more like bringing in all these other elements into what I do.
Are there, just out of curiosity, are there a lot of, it seems like to me, Brazilian music has just exploded in popularity in the States in the last few years. Is there a lot of it at Berklee now, more than there used to be?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's been years in the making.
Uh-huh.
I think like a lot of like the new acoustic artists, like your Daryl Anger and Mike
Sure.
Marshall, they've been into it. David Grisman Quintet, they did some Brazilian music as well. So I think it's been creeping in, and it naturally because of the instrumentation,
Hmm.
there's a lot of crossover like with mandolin in
Sure.
particular. I think the sonic aesthetic is there, just like with gypsy jazz and bluegrass people. It's like a lot of bluegrassers know some gypsy jazz, and they love hanging out in that world.
Hmm.
Yeah, it is kind of fascinating because it does seem like the Brazilian style more than others. Like there's Argentinian tango. I mean, there's
Yeah.
other great world styles, but but the Brazilian style is definitely more than others. I feel like has been creeping in, like you said. And at Berklee, there's now like you know choro jams and that kind of thing.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
cool.
isn't that cool?
That's very cool. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Um, so Zhu thanks you for entry, for answering that.
Mhm.
This isn't a question, but someone just wrote Jason Anick, three exclamation marks, heart, heart, heart. Uh, thought you'd like to know.
Oh, thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Jason before he has to run off to his gig? Yes, Ricardo Hertz is a great Brazilian violinist.
Nice. I would love
You must know
to.
Ricardo,
I
right, Jason?
don't. I would love to listen. Yeah, send me some stuff.
Ricardo, in some ways, is actually the reason that I play Brazilian music.
Ah.
Because I was in Brazil and I went to this amazing gig. And at the time, I was just studying jazz, and this was like a jazz bar. And I went up to it was Alexandre Ribeiro, amazing clarinet player. And I went up and I was like, because I remember learning this. Maybe even you told me this. I can't remember. Someone was like, always talk to the musicians after the gig. And so I
Hmm.
went up to the musicians and I was like, I just have to say, like, this was amazing. I'm a jazz violinist. And he's like, oh, there's a jazz violinist right here. And it was Ricardo on the front row.
Ah.
And so Alexandre introduced me to Ricardo, and then Ricardo introduced me to like all sorts of people, but in the Brazilian musical world.
Yeah, yeah. I love it.
You should check him out, man. I'll send you a link to him.
Please do. Yeah, like I said, I feel like there's so much more to learn, and I'm just excited. I'm excited to just keep digging into what's out there, and that's something that is really great. Is like being a musician is you're never. I feel I've never felt bored. I've never been like,
Yeah.
oh, what should I do? There's like nothing to do. I've mastered everything. No, I've never
Yeah,
felt
of
that. I'm
course not.
always like, oh my god, so much more to learn, and that's something that's really fun.
Well,
So I
another,
hope to dig more into that.
forgive me, I just can't help but talk about Brazilian music, but I think it's great that you're playing Brazilian music as a violin player because um, Brazilian violin, I mean, it really is only come to be accepted as like the violin has really only become to be accepted as a non-classical instrument in the last 20 to 25 years.
Mm.
I mean, it was actually there were a lot of Brazilian violinists
Hmm.
100 years ago, but for whatever reason, in Brazil it has more of this classical association. And in the last 20 years, there's been this explosion of popularity, and it's funny. A lot of the gringos that I know that play Brazilian music are violinists, and I think it's because so much of our music is violin based. When you look at like
Hmm.
bluegrass and old time music and Cajun and Irish music, and the fiddle, as it were, is such an important instrument. And so I think it's great for other people to see you playing Brazilian music on the violin, or any violinist playing it. Other fiddlers to see that, because then it makes
Yeah,
them
yeah.
think that, oh, this I can do that too.
Hmm.
Because like I feel like a lot of violinists might not play jazz because they think, oh, that's a saxophone player's genre, or that's a trumpet player's genre. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, for
but
sure.
music is music, like you said, and
Oh yeah, and the best thing that you can do as a musician is to transcend your instrument.
hmm
And so it goes both ways. It's like it's awesome to hear violinists or what like violin play be in settings that are in other worlds, and it's awesome. And it comes down to just like yeah, like you said, music is music, and you can transcend your instrument by making really diving into a style and figuring out how to make it work. And yeah.
we the Brazilian questions just don't stop, Jason. Here's one more. When and how did you start to play Brazilian music?
Hmm. That's a that's a good question. I feel like I probably first started with what isn't necessarily traditional, but like certain styles. I was starting to get in like I was starting to probably hearing more like what we call like jazz bossa, which is again
Yeah,
not necessarily there, but at least some of the rhythmic elements come from that.
yeah.
Um, but probably a number of years back, I was I got some Hamilton de Landa albums, and I just was like digging into it, and then I was like, um, and Olli Solikkei, who
Mhm.
is the plays with Rhythm Future Quartet, also was getting into it as well, and he was learning choros, I was just loving learning them. They were so fun to learn them,
Yeah.
you know, and so I think then I really dove deeper into the choro style.
hmm
Um, and then the past few years, I've been doing a camp that is both gypsy jazz and Brazilian music, and some more traditional percussion. Brazilian percussionists were there,
hmm
and I just was just digging deeper into it. And so yeah, it's been more of a recent thing. So I think I heard it a little bit over the years through more kind of different types of genres that have would be called more like Latin jazz, that kind of thing.
hmm
And then I got deeper into listening to a lot of Jacob
Yeah.
Berlin.
Well, you can't go wrong there.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the Bible when it comes to Brazilian choro.
Mm-hmm. And again, I got plenty of to learn, but every time I work on a new choro piece, or dive deeper into the rhythmic groove, I just
hmm
learn so much, and it informs my other styles as well. I love mixing and matching stuff, and
Yeah.
the deeper I get into that, the deeper I'm able to explore it within other worlds as well.
Well, before we go here, someone said, I just finished my master's degree and now I'm diving into jazz. It's a whole new world.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Well, best of
awesome.
luck. Yeah,
Yeah.
shoot me
Um,
if you ever. They can always shoot me email if they have questions about how to get into this into jazz as violinists.
Well, for the people on Instagram, they can message you on Instagram
Yeah, for
as well.
sure.
Before we go, can you tell us you mentioned some back burner projects. Are there any recording projects we can look forward to, or things you can tell us about that you're gonna
Yeah, so
release?
probably won't be for a little while, but I have been working towards writing, arranging with my trio. So
Mm-hmm.
that's my the Jason Anick acoustic trio, violin, guitar, bass, and so that's been really fun. And that group is like actually probably the first group that does incorporate throughout the set every kind of style that I've grown up playing.
Mm-hmm.
And you know,
Cool.
and so that's been fun. So we'll even do some more roots inspired stuff, and then jazz, and then world music, and it just goes everywhere.
So
And
sorry, go ahead.
that has been something we've been. That's one of those projects that is just like we were starting to play a bunch early in this year, and a lot of we had a lot of fun tours planned, and so when everything was canceled, it was like for a while I was like, it's just gonna it's gonna go down, and it'll take a little while to just kind of get back in the momentum. But since we've been playing again this past couple weeks
Cool.
with some of the concerts we've been talking about, I've been working back on writing, arranging for that group, and we're definitely gonna do a recording, either
Cool.
the end
And
of
the
this
J-Tudes,
year.
of course, if you're just joining us, Jason.
J-Tudes, yes. My
Yeah.
solo violin caprices are in full swing, and
Piece of cake.
I'm working on them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking your time to share all this wisdom and all the news and everything, Jason.
Yeah,
Being
no
part
problem.
of Musicians Workbench.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So actually stick around, Jason. Don't go just yet, but we are going to end the live here. So we're going to say goodbye to everyone on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for